Welcome to this session on circular business solutions for nature action. Today, we'll explore how circular solutions can be harnessed to reach nature targets and tackle biodiversity loss. Here today with us, we have some leading experts in the field working on the science-based targets for nature, as well as some leading companies in the field that have set nature targets and are using circular solutions that are particularly relevant from a nature perspective. If you haven't downloaded the app, you might want to check your email. There was an email on Friday where you have a personal link to the app that's targeted with, it's labeled with a few important notifications. So you can find your personal link to the app there. This app will let you choose one of the leading companies that will pitch their solutions later in this session. My name is Tim Forslund, and I work with circular economy and biodiversity at the Finnish Innovation Fund, Sitra. We have, for example, published a report tackling root causes that highlights that the circular economy can indeed halt and reverse biodiversity loss by focusing on 4 key sectors that are particularly relevant from a nature perspective. These are food and agriculture, fibers and textiles, buildings and construction, and the forest sector. And we also have companies representing these 4 sectors here with us today. Building on these findings, we'll also present new findings here today. So stay tuned. And to make the circular circle completely complete, I also have someone with me here today that played a vital role in making this study tackling root causes possible in the first place. And it's my former Sitra colleague and youth nature delegate and now specialist at Corbion, Sara Yrjönmäki. Sara, what do we have to look forward to here today?
Well, from my perspective and from the youth perspective, what I'm really excited about is that this is about concrete action. What youth often highlight is that, great ambitions are wonderful, but you need to pair that with action in practice. And that's what we're seeing here today. So excited. I'm going to take this message also forward to Youth for Circular Economy, which is going to be a sustainable innovation event for Nordic youth later in the summer. Super excited what we will together come up with from there. But let's go straight into the session, shall we? I will introduce our first speaker, who is Thomas Maddox, Global Director for Nature at CDP, which was launched as the Carbon Disclosure Project back in 2004. Thomas will come and talk to us about his work in supporting the development of the science-based targets for nature, what kind of solutions can really support the nature as best as possible, and how his work as CDP plays into everything that we're talking about today. Thomas, thank you.
Thanks very much, Sara. Can I just check my microphone's working? Yep, great. Okay. So, let's jump straight into it. We're going to be talking today in this session about business and nature. And I'd like to start just by revisiting a couple of concepts that we actually heard earlier in the plenary sessions about both of those concepts. So the first one is about the role of business, and the role of business in driving this the shift of the global economy into this safe operating space within environmental boundaries. Now, of course, that can't all rest on the shoulders of business, but business does have an absolutely crucial role in that transition, and it's for 2 reasons. The first reason is that, unfortunately, many of the activities that are led by business are causing us to go over those environmental barriers, so restricting those impacts is one of the priorities we have to be doing. Perhaps more excitingly, though, business also has a key role in actually actively driving us towards that green, safe operating space through different ways of thinking through business models and actually driving the economy into that space. The second concept I wanted to revisit was just this concept of nature, and this might sound a little bit sort of counterintuitive in a session focused on nature from a guy whose job title is focused on nature, but I'd like you to actually sort of drop the idea of nature as something separate. It was referred to earlier in the plenary, But this idea we have, the approach we have to looking at environmental problems as a sort of succession of different things, climate, nature, plastics pollution, water extraction, it's not a very effective or very productive way of looking at it. Because not only are these issues not just linked, they're all basically part of the same issue. Our environmental challenge is just that we demand too much of the environment, either in terms of what we take from it or what we demand the waste that it processes for us. And at the same time, we exacerbate that issue by undermining the supply, by destroying and degrading ecosystems and the biodiversity within them. Every environmental issue basically comes back to that. And so treating it in these sort of siloed different approaches is the same as a doctor trying to approach an illness by just looking at the different symptoms and not stepping back and looking at the underlying causes. So everything you're going to hear today from my slides, and I think for the rest of the session, I think it's not specific for nature. This is the kind of approach that we need to be taking holistically. So I said business plays a key role in delivering this. So what does business need to be doing? Well, the good news is that there's lots of new guidance, frameworks, standards out there that's outlining what business should be doing. The bad news is that there's lots of guidelines, standards, and frameworks out there that outlines what business should be doing, and it's all getting a little bit confusing. But if we take a step back, they all essentially say the same thing. And the same thing is basically this. First of all, you need to understand your business. You need to understand the full value chain. What are you doing? Where are you doing it? What's the environmental context of where you're doing it? Secondly, you need to use that information and look at what are your environmental relationships in those sites. So this is all of them. Don't just go in and just look at what's my climate impact, what's my impact on species. It's looking at all of the environmental relationships. What are the impacts? What are my dependencies? And what are the risks and opportunities that flow from that? Once you've got that information, then you set targets, what to do about it. I'm going to come back to that step in a second. Fourthly, you then act on those targets. You might not be surprised to know that's the area where a lot of companies fall down. Very good at setting targets, not so good at then delivering them. Then the last section is then, or the last step is then you've got to disclose on that action. And that's key for locking in your progress and for incentivizing further improvement. So the last few minutes, I'm just going to take you through those last three steps of that cycle. So the first one, it's about setting targets. So setting targets is a perfectly normal process to do in business, but you need to be setting science-based targets. So science-based targets are slightly different because they look at the global context, and they essentially work out what's your target, what's your fair share within that global context. So it might be a concept you're more familiar with for climate. That looks at what are our global targets on climate, what would be the fair share for your sector or for your company on what emissions would be allowable and still be on track for that process. Now, the organization, the Science Based Targets Network, of which my organization is one of the founding members, they're trying to do this for all the other environmental targets that need to be set beyond climate. So it's a process that's not quite as developed as climate yet. There are steps out there in the public now that tell you how to approach this, how to start setting up targets for nature. They're being piloted at the moment, and new versions of those are going to be coming out, taking into account the results from the pilots in the next couple of months. So that's the first step, is setting your targets. Once you've set your targets, you need to act on them. And again, there are frameworks that describe how you can act, because not all actions are equal. The first actions that are most important are avoidance. If you don't cause a problem, that's the most effective way of dealing with it. So the avoidance is the first thing to do. Second is reduction. You look at the impacts that you can't avoid and you reduce them as much as possible. Thirdly, once you reduce them as much as possible, you can look at restoring and regenerating to compensate for the impacts that you're still causing. Now, this is where circular economy thinking comes in, because circular economy and circular thinking is a really effective way of delivering many of these targets. It's particularly effective for avoidance. When you start recycling, that's all about reducing the inputs in the first place, and it's particularly important for reducing as well. Again, looking at these closed-loop systems, reduce the amount of impact that companies are having. So circular thinking is a really important way of addressing these actions. And there are several organizations now that are both starting to set science-based targets as part of the pilot studies, and then using circular thinking to reach those targets. So one of them, Corbion, I know my colleague Saskia is going to be coming and speaking a little bit more about that soon. And there's a couple of other companies as well that are also setting science-based targets and thinking about circular approaches to address them, such as Holcim. The last step of that cycle is then you've got to disclose what you've been doing. And so there's that business adage that you can't manage what you don't measure, but equally if you don't disclose what you've measured, the incentive for doing something about it is much reduced. So this is where my organization focuses, is on that power of disclosure to then drive further positive change. So we work with investors, with major buyers, to ask companies to disclose to us on their environmental performance. And then we provide a platform. They can fill in questionnaires, and basically they show how they're dealing with certain environmental issues. That disclosure, and we now have over 20,000 companies disclosing to us, that disclosure then goes back into the market, and we use that information to talk to investors, to talk to individual companies, to talk to regulators about how can that be improved. So that's the last final step that really locks in progress and makes sure that it's further improved into the future. So that's all from me for the moment. If you'd like to learn more about SBTN, if you'd like to learn more about CDP, please use the links on here or come up and speak to me afterwards. Otherwise, I'm going to be looking forward to the rest of the session to hear about how circular thinking is driving some of these targets on nature. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Thomas. Really great to hear everyone's on the same page now about what we need to be doing. Next, we'll hear 4 case studies from 4 very exciting companies. We have Hailia, Parmaco, Colorifix, and Plockhugget. We will be hearing 4 of these back to back, 3 minutes each. I'm going to be very ruthless. No one gets extra time. We will start with Michaela from Hailia, and then we'll go from there. And after that, of course, sorry, I almost forgot, you all have a role too. You get to vote. So you might have seen the instructions before. There will be a chance for you to vote in the interaction space in the app. So get ready for that, listen tight, and welcome, Michaela.
Thank you. So hello to everybody. My name is Michaela Lindström, and I'm the managing director and co-founder of a Finnish food tech startup within the seafood industry, startup from Finland. I'm going to start with a question. Did you know that the current practice within fish processing industry generates large quantities of side streams and even waste? Europe's fishing industry alone processes over 5 million tons of fish annually, of which 50 to up to 70% ends up as side streams. Did you listen to that? I mean, that's over half of the fish weight is underutilized. It's like throwing away half of what is perfectly nutritious proteins filled with omega-3, vitamin D, and minerals. These side streams are either used as low-value animal feed or even disposed, rather than used for direct human consumption. It's not a very smart nor economical way to do business. We in Hailia, we believe that the current utilization of seafood is highly inefficient, and this needs to change. With the global demand for seafood set to double by 2050, we in Hailia acknowledge the risks linked to sustainability and biodiversity, and we are here to make a positive change. We turn side streams mainstream and waste to profit. Our technology simply multiplies the value of what fish processors already have in their hands. And that's what I think is the beauty of all circular economy solutions, that you use resources efficiently and also make more money on the bottom line. So in short, we focus on how to utilize and upcycle underutilized seafood raw material into tasty, nutritious food with excellent texture with the help of novel food production technology and know-how. We know how to transform seafood side streams into a range of delicious food products, enabling versatile and convenient cooking in both professional and home kitchens. Our commitment to sustainability is evident, as side streams are our primary ingredient. And this not only promotes biodiversity, but also enables an exceptionally low carbon footprint. We are committed to creating circular economy solutions that enables a more resource-efficient fish industry. Thank you.
Thank you, Michaela. Next up, we have Tomi from Parmaco.
Hi, everyone. So, I'm Tomi. Who are we? What's Parmaco? Well, we are a Nordic circular green tech company providing public buildings as a service. What is the problem that we're solving? Well, we all know that buildings stand for more than a third of global CO2 emissions. Often the discussions circle around building materials and energy efficiency. That's not wrong, but it doesn't give you the whole picture. Let me share you a local example from my home country, Finland. Did you know that due to changes in population, demographics, and ways of working, less than a third of government buildings are in use on a daily basis? So the real problem, I think, has two dimensions. One, firstly, we keep on building static buildings that become obsolete. That means that we actually build too much. I'm not sure whether the buildings or the people are in the wrong place, but it does not match over time. A long life cycle, for example 100 years, does not help if no one needs the building after 20 years of use. Secondly, we still use poorly recyclable materials, such as concrete. As energy gets cleaner, the importance of material choices in the building phase grow. The construction industry has to find sustainable materials and ways of working. Our solution then, Parmaco offers dynamic buildings as a service. A dynamic building is a building that can grow, shrink, or move and serve multiple purposes during its life cycle. Our customers and nature only pay for the spaces that they really need. I suppose that most of you are thinking container houses or transportable sheds. Absolutely not. Those are a thing of the past. We offer permanent quality modular buildings that you cannot tell apart from houses built on site. Our technologies allow us to offer this along with cost savings for our customers. We already have a fleet of over 400 schools, hospitals, and offices to prove it. We're growing rapidly, also outside the Nordics. We move dozens of buildings every year, cutting about 90% of the CO2 load compared to a new build. And by 2026, we can do it completely carbon-free. It is time to rethink how buildings are defined. Buildings have to adapt to our needs, not the other way around. This way, we can massively impact the carbon footprint of the whole building sector. What we need is the right building in the right place at the right time. And that's what Parmaco can provide. Thanks.
Thank you, Tomi. Next up, we have Nora coming to tell us more about Colorifix. Welcome, Nora.
Hello, everyone. I'm Nora, and I'm very excited to be here today to introduce you and give you a brief overview of what we do at Colorifix. Because as probably many in this room, and it's been mentioned multiple times today already, the textile industry is not very great for our planet. But what's less known is how big a part the wet processing and dyeing is of this problem. It's actually estimated that about a fourth of all chemical produced today is used in textiles. So we're polluting and we're contaminating the water and nature around us to create colors for clothes that won't even be worn. At Colorifix, we did something, we went into nature for a solution. So what we do is that we find a color of interest, but instead of extracting it from nature, we look at the DNA sequencing that's producing that specific pigment. We then engineer microorganisms to produce the same pigments in the same way. We send this pigment to our customers, the dye houses and the textile mills, who grow it through fermentation on site. This dye liquid then goes into the existing machinery. It's applied to the same fabric, it has the exact same end quality, and it looks the same. By using our technology, we're not only replacing all toxic chemicals, but we're also significantly decreasing the usage of water, energy, and electricity. So we're already launched garments with brands like H&M and Pangaia. And while I'm standing here today and talking to you, our brilliant team is working very hard on implementing our technology on sites in Europe, Portugal, Italy, and this year we're also moving into Brazil and Southeast Asia. So while our technology might sound very advanced, our mission and our goal is very, very simple. We want to create color in a better way, just as it's done in nature. Thank you.
Okay, one more to go. Let's welcome Johan from Plockhugget. Come on up.
Thank you. Thank you. And I'm going to bring, Tomi, I'm going to bring you a construction material that is sustainable. So 97% of forest in Sweden, I'm from Sweden, come from clear-cut forests. Clear-cut meaning that you cut down everything, every tree, take away everything, the ground basically dies and dries out and start leaking carbon dioxide. There is a process of breaking down in the soil, and that only leaks. That carbon leakage is just as large as all the emissions from the Swedish industry. 15 million tons of CO2. Not to speak of the biodiversity loss. So we are tearing down everything, the fungi in the ground, all the species that were living there, and just to replant them. And it's being replanted, that's great, but it's being replanted by one species of spruce or of pine, and you keep everything else away. For them all to grow in the same height, same speed, to become timber for construction. And this could be done so much better. Plockhugget has a standard for picking. Plockhugget is picking trees in little groups in a way that what's on the ground can grow and become a biodiversity and a continuous cover forestry. And that has proven with these methods to give more construction timber, much less paper pulp though, but more construction timber, and though economically, and like that, economically very good. And the climate effect is huge, so is the biodiversity. With a certificate system that makes it possible to apply on all construction timber in a house, and like that, you can construct a climate neutral house with a link to that continuously growing forest out there, like a friend forest to the facility where you can go pick mushrooms. That's all from me. Thank you. I didn't mention we're a startup, and we're looking for capital in the next coming days.
Thank Thank you so much, Hailia, Colorifix, Parmaco, and Plockhugget. We have heard from you. Now it's time for the audience to give your vote. You're going to have 60 minutes, so 60 minutes, sorry. That's too much. 60 seconds. So go on the app. You should be able to interact now. And once the 60 seconds starts, do that. Do we have the timer somewhere? 3, 2, 1, go.
So what should we do in the meantime?
I feel like you should tell us something about your work.
Well, I could, I suppose.
I mean,
think
we're here.
we have heard from 4 examples here today. We'll hear from one more soon, Corbion. And I've seen in the audience here, we have Envio, who's working on food waste. For instance, we have Kliphuis, who's getting more value from olive byproducts. And we have also Triodos Bank, who's looking at how a building can apply circular solutions for nature as well. So there are a lot of different solutions out there. So what we have done at Sitra is to publish a list of leading European circular solutions for nature. So if any of this sounds interesting, I suggest that you check out our website and you can find more about these companies, or perhaps you're interested in how Christmas trees can be reused year after year, going from a single-use model, but using live trees to use them year after year. So if any of those solutions sound interesting, do check out our website at sitra.fi, and there you can select English in the top right corner. And together with the list, we also have an action-oriented handbook with concrete guidance to help companies on this journey to start using circular business models that are particularly well suited for nature. And we have 2 of the authors here as well. Rico and Fiorella have been instrumental in making this handbook practical in the first place. So if you have any questions to the companies or the authors, don't hesitate to stick around. But no, Sara, how is the voting coming along? Who gets the 12 points?
Well, it's not quite Eurovision, but we do have a jury as well. You guys all are the audience points. And online, we have a couple of Finnish youth who work with circular economy and environmental topics. And they've given their jury vote, which goes to, let me just check. I'm not just social media addicted. This is my jury stuff. Very important. Parmaco. Parmaco wins the jury vote. And in the meantime, we've gotten the results for the audience vote as well. So, are you ready? Yes? Okay. The audience vote goes to Colorifix. Congratulations to our winners, both the jury and the audience winner. If you stick around after the session, there will be a prize. The prizes include circular solutions for nature that are also included on the list, including fish that has been underutilized, as well as fab patches that help fix things, fix textiles. Sorry, I'm on a stage, so I forget words. You'll be very happy with the prizes.
Makes a lot of sense. So I think we have a lot to look forward to. And at this point, I would like to invite back on stage Thomas Maddox from CDP. And I'd also like to welcome Saskia Kliphuis from Corbion, who's the Public Affairs Director, as well as Anis Nassar, who's the Resource Circularity Lead at the World Economic Forum. Please, welcome to the stage. So it's really great to have you 3 with us here today. I think the audience might have a question or 2 for you, so be prepared and do submit those questions, and I will be getting those here, hopefully. And I would also be delighted to hear your reflections on the companies that you just heard and to hear your thoughts about those. But to start off, I'd like to first just ask each one of you a direct question. So starting with you, Saskia, Corbion is a Netherlands-based listed company and a leading supplier of food preservation solutions, functional blends, and algae ingredients. Sounds very exciting. And it's also one of the 17 companies that are actually participating in the SBTN validation pilot at the moment. And surprise, surprise, it's one of the companies on the Circular Solutions for Nature list as well. And I think I've had a chance to learn a little bit about Corbion, but could you open up and tell us a little bit more about Corbion and perhaps also about your SBTN journey?
Yes, so is my micro? Yeah, now it's working. So Corbion is a bio-based company where we are good at fermentation for over more than 100 years. Regarding our SBTN participation, we are addressing challenges in sustainability already for a long time, and we are constantly seeking to reduce our environmental footprint. So we joined, and you saw that already in the former presentation, participated in voluntary initiatives such as CDP and Science Based Targets Initiative. And we set our science-based targets first validated already in 2019. So it is very complex, and we also felt the need to set targets for nature beyond climate. So this is when we first thought, okay, when SBTN started, we should participate in this one. This was a logical step in our minds.
Makes a lot of sense, and really glad that you could make it here.
Yeah.
Anis, we've had the pleasure to work on this session together actually with you and your other colleagues at the World Economic Forum, so we're really delighted to have you guys here. And you're doing a lot of work related to sustainability quite broadly, from the circular economy to climate and biodiversity. Would you mind telling us a little bit more about the work that you do at the World Economic Forum, and perhaps in particular with the circular innovators?
Yeah, absolutely. It'd be my pleasure. But first, let me thank the innovators who came up and shared these solutions. I always find it so inspiring. I'm very admirative of innovators who come in front of us and share these ideas. So thanks a lot to Johan, Nora, Tomi, Michaela. I really enjoyed all of these presentations. I'm sure we'll get the opportunity to work together again. What I always find interesting with these solutions is we know these solutions work. They're out there, and the question is, how do we bring them to small scale, to much larger scale, to something that might change an industry? And with these questions come often the question of financing. We've seen, according to the Nature Conservancy, there's a 700 billion gap in financing still for nature solutions. There's a lot of positive momentum coming with financial institutions who are seeing this gap and trying to play their role. I think one to cite is in 2020, 150 financial organizations came together to sign a biodiversity pledge. These organizations represent more than 20 trillion of asset under management. It's good to pledge, and we're seeing action, but I think it's for all of us now to think, how can we deploy this capital in a way that it goes to also innovative solutions, not only rather scale projects? On what we do at the World Economic Forum and with the circulars, we're trying as well to support smaller scale innovators with this initiative called the Circulars that we've been running with Uplink now for I think 9 years in partnership with Accenture and others. And we try to do mainly two things. One is to surface some innovators through innovation challenges. So if you are an innovator in this room and you'd be keen on working with us, simply Google Uplink. I'm sure there's going to be a challenge up right now. But we're trying to go a bit further than simply surfacing these innovators and providing with the light that the forum can bring, but really trying to build these what we call innovation ecosystems around them. Because Innovating is hard. Even if you imagine you get the funding, it's still hard. So we're trying to make sure we bring all the relevant parties around the table, from the venture, from the policymakers to the larger incumbents who could be buyers of the product, or even simply go-to-market advisors.
And I've had the chance to learn about a few of these, and I have to say it's quite a cornucopia of different circular solutions that you have.
I've met so many of them by chance in the corridor here. So.
Well, that's why we're here today, and I think also to talk about action as well. And we heard from action specifically to nature with Thomas. We heard during your keynote that there's a strong link between the circular economy and biodiversity. And I wanted to dig a little bit deeper into this, how we should think about how the circular economy links to biodiversity. And you mentioned that this is particularly relevant to avoiding and reducing impacts as assessed in the science-based targets for nature. So could you open up this interface between circular economy and biodiversity? And perhaps you could also mention some of your favorite circular solutions for nature.
So I can give it a go. I mean, I think the best way of looking at it is thinking of circular thinking as a tool that happens to be useful for addressing some of these targets. I think circular thinking's got many arguments for why you should be doing it. Sometimes it's purely economic, sometimes it just obviously makes sense, but often it also can help drive some of these targets. So I talked about you can use science-based targets for nature to set your targets. So at the moment, the ones that are available focus on if you're having impacts on land and if you're having impacts on fresh water, and that will help you work out, okay, if you're having impacts, what should you be doing about it? What should you be doing about avoiding those impacts, about minimizing your footprint, or about doing something about restoration or regeneration, landscape approaches? That all kind of comes under the guidance there. So once you've done your assessment and you work out where your impacts are and what your targets need to be, what's the appropriate amount to reduce those impacts, that's where the circular thinking approaches often become very relevant. And I think we've already heard several examples. Saskia mentions some examples there, which are focusing particularly on, I think a lot of these approaches really are really good for avoidance, because they're looking at, the circular thinking is moving away from that linear process of taking and then throwing away at the other end, and it's avoidance of impacts of that taking stage. So if you're producing new products that mean you don't have to take from the environment, and we heard several examples of it as well in the pictures as well. If you're taking alternative products, then that reduces that avoids the impact of taking from the environment and impacting biodiversity that way straight off. And the other area is particularly around the reduction of impacts. Again, if you start thinking about how you can be more efficient in your processes. Again, Saskia, I was looking at some of the stuff that your company is doing about the way that water is used, and how that is, it's much more circular in that the water is reused from different systems in different parts of the company. So that's reducing the impacts of water abstraction, and that's going to help you meet your freshwater targets. So they're not silver bullets. They're not, circular thinking is not the way that you're going to completely reform your company and be completely aligned with a global economy that's within planetary boundaries, but it's a really useful approach that often meets several targets at the same time.
I see, and I think here we have also been inspired in some way to think about, do you need to build a building in the first place? Do you need to have these toxic dyes in the first place? Or can we tackle some of the waste already in the first place? I think it challenges to think a little bit differently. And Saskia, I wanted to ask you more about Corbion, that you have, I've learned a little bit about your work, and you, not only do you have a lot of nature initiatives, but you also have quite concrete solutions that are circular, that happen to be relevant from a nature perspective. Could you tell us a little bit more about?
Yeah, I think that's everybody is waiting for me to tell, right? So yeah, for example, we at Corbion, we produce microalgae. This is produced by ferment sugar in closed fermentation tanks, where the sugars are transformed to microalgae in a few days. And this is a really circular process, because the algae facility is located next to the sugarcane fields. So and also next door to the sugar mill. So this is already logical-wise, it's handy. And then what we also have is that the bagasse, that is the byproduct from the sugar mill, is used as energy source as a renewable energy source to power not only our algae facility but also the sugar mill. And then the water we use for the fermentation, it's also given back as irrigation in the sugarcane fields to give us a responsible way to manage our water. And then if we have the microalgae, they produce omega-3s, DHA, which is an essential nutrient in animal feed, but also for humans. And for example, if it's used in feed to feed salmon, this could improve salmon health by improving, for example, organ health. So this is our main market at the moment. So our DHA goes into the feed where it replaces the fish oil. So it's from algae. The algae oil replaces the fish oil in feed. Where in this way there is a lot of. Normally, the fish oil is made from fish caught in the water, from pelagic fish. And to use our algae oil, so as to substitute the fish oil by our algae oil, you don't have to catch all those fish. So in this way, I think Corbion saved 1.5 million metric tons of fish being caught in the sea over the last 5 years. So this is a great example to be circular, and this is also reducing the carbon footprint, because we have done an ISO-compliant LCA for our algae, and this is lower than the fish oil LCA. So today we are also looking into developing strains which are producing more omega-3s.
Strains of algae.
Yes. So we are constantly seeking innovative ways to reduce our environmental impact. And for example, we joined the SBTN framework, and we've been piloting the SBTN methodology back last year, where we also looked into freshwater and land use. For example, we have our land use is already small because we use these fermentation tanks, but still we have set a target on that one and saying by 2025 we want to be 100% deforestation free, which was, for example, in 2022 it was still 92%. So this is constantly how we're trying to find new ways to...
Constant improvement.
Yes, constantly improving, yeah.
And I think one thing that I've heard quite often is that a circular economy for water and for fisheries, what does that mean? And I think hopefully that's been a little bit clearer here today, that we can provide some answers to what that could look like potentially, and how those solutions also relate to nature. And I was thinking, you have so much work at the World Economic Forum related to nature, and it actually inspired us in the first place to do this study, Tackling Root Causes, back in 2022, the new Nature series report. So I was wondering if you have any solutions that you think really illustrate how we can think about circular economy and nature together.
Yeah, so I'll also use the time to reflect also on the question that you asked, Thomas, and it's a bit the same. So this link between circular economy and nature, and I think the link has been made. It couldn't have been made more clearly than recently in the Global Resource Outlook from the UN Environmental Programme, which is a bit of a flagship report that they put out there every 4 to 5 years. There's no need to go very deep in this report to go to the number one key finding, which is our increased resource use is the main cause of the triple planetary crisis. That is biodiversity loss, pollution, and climate change. So all of this being driven by our increased resource use. So if we think about the circular economy as a way to manage our resources efficiently, it's also going to be the main driver to decrease biodiversity loss, to decrease climate change, and to decrease pollution. In terms of solutions that are out there and ways to think, I think you've put out there the main ones, right? If we think built environment, why? Simply because it's one of the main consumers of resources. It's the only consumer of concrete and cement, which is one of the hard-to-abate materials, main consumer of steel, also one of the hard-to-abate materials, second biggest consumer of aluminum, plastics, and so on. Similarly, if we look at everything linked to food production, because of the land use, there's immense potential there. I think there's two areas, so I agree with all of those, and these are definitely the main sectors that we should be investing our efforts on for the circular economy. Some areas that I find particularly exciting for our work in the coming months and year is on water use, fisheries of course, but there's, I think, a big opportunity to think about fresh water use, because first it's one of the main, the most urgent nature crises that we're facing. The UN is estimating that by 2030, freshwater demand will outstrip supply by 40%. That's tomorrow, and it's a staggering number. So everything we can do to decrease this water demand is going to be critical. And at the same time, we're going to get a huge increase in freshwater demand from data centers, because we're seeing, of course, all of us, the rise of AI, the rise of cloud computing, that's going to provide us with an incredible increase in productivity in the coming decade, but at the cost of an increase of water demand. So managing this from the get-go in circular ways is something that we will be working on, trying to understand, are there solutions that allow us to cycle the water through these data centers, not 10 times or 12 times like it's done now, because then they gather a bit too much impurities, but can we increase through new technologies to 24 times, 36 times, 48 times, and so on. So that's work that we're particularly excited about. And a newer topic as well is on thinking of how to establish a circular carbon economy. And before going there, let me make crystal clear, it's very obvious to everyone that decarbonizing should be the main goal of everything that we do. But even if we decarbonize completely by 2050, there is still too much carbon out there in the atmosphere. We will still need to have efforts to pull down some of this carbon. And the question is, what do we do with it? We will have carbon sinks, that's clear. It's going to be one of the options to store this carbon, but there will also be other opportunities to think of this carbon that is potentially the main waste that we have into a new valuable resource for certain aspects of our economies, and specifically some of these harder to abate materials, such as construction materials, such as chemicals, such as aviation fuels. And here, if we can decrease the GHG intensity of these materials through establishing this circular carbon economy, that's also something that shows a lot of promise in the coming months.
So a circular economy for water and a circular economy for carbon. It sounds like one framework to rule them all. Another framework that we have worked on is SBTN, the Science-Based Targets for Nature. And we have there, I think, water has been the first area for which some initial guidance was released even before last year. So I think that's been one of the areas where we've come the furthest. So it's really, I think, tempting to think about what the circular solutions are. And it's, I think, promising to see that at least some solutions are already out there. At this point, we have a few questions from the audience. And Sara also mentioned that we have a youth jury, and there's another event that she mentioned that will take place in the summer. So I wanted to invite your thoughts, if you could give some key recommendations for youth circular innovators, what would that be? And a second question here, I'm nodding at Thomas, no pressure, but are there any methodologies for individual companies to measure their impacts in relation to the planetary boundaries specifically? So, Thomas, would you like to start first to reply to one of those questions?
So in terms of, so I'll answer the second question first, just because I can remember it better. So in terms of the frameworks and guidelines and so on, there is a lot out there. And as I said in that introductory talk, part of the problem is that before we had no guidance, and then loads of guidance has come out, and people are getting a bit confused. And But there's some really good stuff out there. It's been produced by different organizations, and it tends to sort of all be pulling in the same direction, and then they're all talking and then bringing them closer together and aligning them. So in a way, it doesn't really matter which one you pick. I had a slide that sort of showed various frameworks on it. So SBTN is one of the frameworks that I'd obviously support. It tells you, it's focused on setting your targets, but it takes you through the steps, what you need to do to work up to setting that target. How would you do that properly? TNFD is another really influential framework out there. The TNFD does two things, really. It's got one framework that says these are the steps you should be doing. And that, again, that follows that sort of cycle that I showed that says, right, first do this, then do this. And then they also make recommendations of the key data points from that. These are the key ones you should be disclosing to the market. That's the sort of TNFD role. But there's, as soon as I start listing them, I realize I'm going to miss key ones, and then people are going to be upset with me for not listing them. But they all tend to do sort of similar things. They often are aimed at slightly different audiences, slightly different sectors, but they're all pulling in the same direction. One of the things you hear from companies is, it's too confusing, I'm going to wait until it's clearer before I act. You shouldn't, because the trajectory of travel is quite clear. That pressure on companies that are not aligning within those planetary boundaries is just going to get higher and higher every year unless we have some magical transformation in our environmental condition. So it's just going to get higher and higher every year. Those that are acting now, using whichever framework you choose, you're going to be better positioned to be responding further down the line when regulation starts coming in and saying this is what you have to be doing. So I'd say I'm not going to recommend one particular framework, apart from I would say the SBTN is a very, very good one. I'd say the TNFD is an extremely good and very comprehensive one. But it kind of doesn't matter. They're all very aligned, or they're all increasingly aligned. They're all pulling in the same direction. Pick one and go with it.
It sounds like it's not an excuse for inaction,
definitely,
in other words.
Definitely.
And I could mention that Sitra is working with the TNFD, the Task Force for Nature-Related Financial Disclosures.
Yeah.
Thank you. In Finland, with financial actors, we're looking into working with that as well. And we have previously piloted with 10 Finnish companies with FIBS, the Finnish Corporate Responsibility Network. We've piloted the science-based targets for nature and tried to understand what circular solutions are particularly relevant when trying to act on those targets. Another project that we have worked also on ecological compensation in Finland, and I think many might ask, what does that have to do with circular economy? You mentioned this avoid and reduce, that's quite clear. You see the circular economy link, but this, I think, ecological compensation, and also if you talk about offsets, it's been a discussion recently with the Science-Based Targets Initiative about the scientific underpinnings if offsets should or should not be included. What do you think is important to think about when we approach this kind of bottom of the pyramid with restore and regenerate?
So, shall I go again? So yeah, what you said the bottom of the pyramid, in that diagram it was actually the top. And the key thing there was that you have to do those steps in order. You have to avoid impacts as much as possible first. Then it's only those impacts that you really can't avoid, then you minimize those ones as much as possible. And it's only those impacts that you really can't minimize any further. That's when you start looking at regeneration and restoration and potentially offsets. So offsets are a little bit controversial because sometimes they're kind of the easiest thing to do. Avoidance is really difficult. Offsets you can almost sort of pay someone else to do the work. I think there is a role for them under certain very sort of strict guidelines and guardrails, but it has to come at the end of that process. And so that's where the controversy comes in, is making sure that there's a clear science-based argument for when they can be used and when they shouldn't be used, and really making sure that they're not used in replacement of something that's going to be much more effective, which is avoidance, because we can't solve all our problems through offsetting everything. It's a very sort of restricted role that they have in that journey towards a green global economy.
It's all about the sequencing and the order of actions. Saskia, I think you mentioned 92%, so I guess some people in the audience might wonder, is the job done? What happens next?
Yeah, so coming a little bit back to what Tomi was saying is that I also do believe that these, and we use the SBTN methodology because we also piloted last year, but I think it's coming back to doing a true assessment of everything on your impact, and especially for us as an international company, so we are maybe not producing in every country. So it could also be that the impact is different in different countries. So we look really specific by the SBTN methodology. It's really easily seeing, so where in those geographical areas, where is the impact in, where we should set the targets for nature or climate or So what we are now doing is that we did pilot the SBTN methodology, and now we are kind of looking in how achievable are those targets, and we are making action plans to really see if we can make those targets. As we said, we had 92% in 2022, and we have still the ambition to be 100% deforestation free in 2025. So yeah, we of course need to do something. It doesn't come for free.
Right.
So we are really making action plans, but still I do believe that you have to start somewhere. So we also started with freshwater and land. But yeah, we can of course do more than that, and that will be something. We are still an ambitious company to be more circular. So yeah, that's where we are now, and yeah, we want to be in the future.
So it sounds like the SBTN has these 5 steps that Thomas showed on the slides, and it looks like it's a kind of linear process, but I think what you suggest is that it's actually more of an iterative, continuous improvement.
I think so, yeah.
More circular to tie this all together. And as we do that, I would like to ask each one of you to, if you would like to just highlight one specific thing that why companies should combine these specific topics, what would you highlight if you could have it in 1 or 2 sentences? So Ani, starting with you.
I think more than that, I'd like to ask a challenge to the audience, so more of a brain teaser, let's say. I think the link is made, so resource use is tied to all of these issues. You said it yourself in your opening, all of these issues are tied, so that should be clear. A challenge that we can think of is most of us are stuck in what we call present forward thinking. So we're thinking about where we are today and how can we improve with a small incremental step where we will be tomorrow. And that's very valuable, and it should be done, of course. But it could be interesting as well for each of us to think future back. So what is the state of the future that we want to reach? What's our blue sky thinking, and how do we get back from there? And some challenge for this future back state that I leave for you to fix is what if your organization tomorrow had to use absolutely no virgin material? What would it look like? What would the business model look like? What would the procurement look like? And if you can solve this, then we will be in a good place.
Thanks, Anis. And we will actually continue the conversation tomorrow in the workshop, where we'll look at how we can take these actions into, ideas into action a little bit more in concrete terms. So do stay tuned for more content related to this. Thomas, if you would like to have your 1 or 2 sentence summary for the audience.
So I was actually going to take a similar approach to you, Anis, in that I was going to throw this straight back to the audience as well. So we're doing some audience bullying here. Because, Tim, you challenged me when I came here to sort of think about what sort of circular approaches could be used to achieve science-based targets and so on. So I was thinking from that perspective of how can I fit this into that? But I'd like to put it back and sort of tell you some of the sort of key challenges that we're seeing at CDP and seeing where companies are struggling to meet their environmental targets, and think about, what circular approaches can be used here. So the key area I work in has been focusing on our forest work and looking at how companies are doing on eradicating deforestation from their supply chains. And it's a big issue, and it's a frustrating issue because deforestation is not needed to produce anything. It's an unnecessary byproduct, and it's only there because we don't have the systems to get rid of it. And so the question I'd like to ask there is, so what sort of solutions are there for the key drivers of deforestation are going to be beef is the biggest one, followed closely by the main oil crops, oil palm and soy. Those 3 commodities account for 60% of deforestation. what circular approaches are there that can help us address those? Because we're looking at very sort of technical, well, understanding where does it come from? How do you deal better with your supply chain and so on? But there should be other approaches, such as alternatives to beef. And this is an area that's starting to come. And also how to increase productivity. There's a huge reduction in impact you can have by reducing the, or increasing productivity of land to produce commodities. So that's a challenge I'd like to throw back is what can the circular economy world, what kind of solutions have you already got that you can help us with?
Very interesting question. We're actually working with the Stockholm Environment Institute, York, looking at some of these commodities, and maybe we can find some new circular solutions for next year's forum, who knows. Saskia, you have the final words. Let's see if you also have a question for the audience.
I don't have. I maybe have an advice for the audience. So what I really want to stress is that you can look into your environmental impact, and you can have the ambition to reduce it, and you can still have a business to run. So it doesn't that you have to do one thing or the other. You can do it both together, and you see it from the examples we have.
Yes,
it's possible.
Makes a lot of sense. And I think, well, trying to wrap this all up won't be easy, but I think Thomas has made it quite clear how these topics, the problems are intertwined, and so are the solutions, and we need to look at this together, land, carbon, water as well. And I think also with Corbion, what you have shown is that to build some of these solutions, you need to think in terms of ecosystems, and even when you design processes and solutions. And also these ecosystems, I think, is quite clear with what the World Economic Forum has done with their innovators, and to help provide some of the tools to accelerate the journey, which we, again, the circular economy is ultimately a tool to help halt biodiversity loss. So that's what we can think about. And at that point, I would like to thank you for joining us today. And yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you. You're closing.
And as we wrap up, I have here with my colleague just some final words, and I would just like to remind you to check out all the other content. We talked about our list here more than enough, but there's also the European Circular Economy Stakeholder Platform that has a booth that's dedicated to this very topic, the circular economy and biodiversity nexus. So do check out their booth as well. And Sara, before we wrap up, do you have any final key takeaways for the audience?
I think maybe it's something you said is there's no excuse for not doing something. We know that these things, biodiversity crisis, the climate crisis, they're already here. They're impacting people all around the world. This is not just some theoretical thing we're talking about, but also we know that there are existing solutions and there are existing guidance. There's everything you need to start doing anything, and anything you do matters. So thank you, everyone who's already doing things, and let's just keep doing more.
Thank you.